Well, I'd like to extend a congratulations to Sir Lewis Hamilton on his 8th World Drivers title this past weekend.
Wow. I mean, I've only got 2.
I mean, technically, he didn't actually win because of some utter shenanigans in the Formula One management camp. But that's probably saved. That's probably best saved for a rant down the pub sometime.
Oh, I know it was rough, Alex. I saw your Twitter feed. I knew it was going to be a rough recording day for you.
Yeah, man. You know, I followed Formula One since I was 6, 7 years old. So a long time. And what went down on Sunday ranks as the most corrupt, fixed thing I've ever seen in sport. I think possibly ever. If you're not a Formula One fan, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But if you are, hopefully you're in solidarity with me and Lewis, because it was, it wasn't cool.
Your faith has been shaken, I can tell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh.
Why do I bother getting emotionally involved in something where they can just change the rules in the last lap? That's the crux of my beef.
I hear you. See, I get really upset when I just watch sports. I either get like really super sucked in any kind of sport, or I cannot pay attention at all. It's one or the two for me. And so it's not generally a pleasant experience.
I mean, I'm used to disappointment. I have been an English football fan my entire life, and I am used to not winning major tournaments or going out at some highly tense moment, but at least the rules of engagement are followed from end to end, however corrupt FIFA may or may not be. But the FIA, man, whew, that was some grade A horse manure on Sunday.
This will never be forgotten. This will be the day.
Never. And I'm sorry, I mean, you know, Max Verstappen, he is a worthy world champion, but this is his first, and it will forever, in my opinion, be tarnished. So, unfortunate for him, but it's the way it goes sometimes. Anyway, should we talk about something that is a little less morbid? And, well, depends on your point of view, I suppose. This AWS outage this past week.
It's a little rough for some. And once again, I don't know why, but this is maybe my favorite part. AWS is a big old outage. You go to their status page. Everything's green. It's all good, Alex. Nothing's down. Meanwhile, the services you depend on are just totally not working. And Amazon just said that network devices got overloaded. That was their essential basic statement on the problem. Like, oh, quite the postmortem there. Okay, network devices got overloaded. All right, why? Why didn't your status page work? That kind of stuff.
That's like saying, you know, I've just crashed into a tree. Well, why did you crash into a tree, Alex? Well, because I didn't turn my wheel enough to stay on the road.
Yeah.
I mean, technically that's accurate.
Why didn't you turn your wheel enough? Oh, I don't know. Yeah, that's true. They do say they're going to work on trying to get the status page working better, though. But along with this, we've also, I mean, this is a trend we've talked about before. It's like everything goes along, it's working great until there's an outage. And so a lot of things quit working that are associated with this. Some of the services we use to produce the shows quit working. And then kind of unrelated to this, I believe, Wise also had an API outage, so you couldn't get access to your Wise devices. And as they expand into door locks and other things like that, motion sensors and whatnot, like that matters a lot.
It absolutely does. Yeah. I mean, I'm not party to any of the internal Amazon discussions that, as to root cause analysis and that kind of thing. But what I do find interesting are the butterfly effect impacts to smart home users. There's things like,
right.
We've put a few links in the show notes that I just got from Twitter by typing in smart home AWS outage. And I found people whose Christmas lights weren't working, whose RoboVacs weren't working, whose smart plugs had stopped working, all because the cloud in US East 1 had stopped working. And I mean, you know, stuff like my home assistant Nebu Casa, that stopped working for a few hours because that must have some reliance somewhere on Amazon. And you know, you look at the way in which AWS tell you to architect your systems. You know, they pioneered the availability zone concept. They pioneered the multi-region concept. The trouble is, certain core services, like Route 53, for example, their DNS service, are based out of US East 1. So if that site goes down, doesn't matter how highly available your system is, you can still be impacted by outages like this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's so many things that you end up using that are either services, applications, or devices that become dependent on something like Amazon. and you don't even know it until it's out. Like, I didn't realize some of the podcasting tools we were using actually were on Amazon and were using that particular data center. I found out, though, I found out the hard way.
It makes you really stop and think about the homogenization of the internet in general, really. You know, stuff like Cloudflare and Amazon, to some extent Google, although I don't think their compute is terribly well utilized, although I'm probably way off base with that given how big Google itself is. Azure as well. You know, there's 5 or 6 companies that control the lion's share of the internet's traffic. And if one of those companies has a problem, then we all do, which makes me question, what's the point in architecting for high availability and spending all these hours spinning our wheels on Kubernetes clusters and all these other complex abstractions on top of these sandcastles, effectively, of cloud architecture, when no matter how much work I put in to keep something available, something completely beyond my control somewhere else down the pipe is going to cause a blockage.
Yeah, the other thing that drives me kind of crazy about it is we're really not taking advantage of some of the strengths of TCP/IP and the way the internet can be routed around. It really lends itself to a decentralized internet. And what we've done for convenience and quality of service and whatever is we've centralized. And we're ignoring one of the key original design strengths of the whole network by doing so. And I don't know if the solution is all of us, we just self-host even harder. I mean, that definitely helps isolate us individuals from these outages. But there are circles of the internet that are talking more and more about decentralization and ways they can become more available and less of a single point of failure. I was just talking with Dave Jones, who is behind podcastindex.org, and they're using IPFS for some of their file storage, trying to prevent any single point of failure for a server outage.
Really makes you stop and think, like the Mars rover, or the Mars copter, I think, is vulnerable to this log4j vulnerability. Like, there's just so much, there's so many libraries, there's so much abstraction between us and the hardware these days. It's really impossible for a mere mortal to keep track of where all this stuff and where all these dependencies are going to lie. So, I don't know what the answer is with regards to AWS, because clearly they are the dominant force in cloud computing. But so far as I'm concerned, in my own personal fiefdom of my house, I didn't really notice a huge amount on the day-to-day, except for the Nebuchadnezzar stuff. When I was at the supermarket, I wanted to just turn the heating down a bit because I thought we were coming straight home and we weren't, Besides that, I didn't really notice a huge impact. Yeah. And that's because I use things like WLED and for my smart lights, and Valetudo for my RoboVac, and Tasmota for all my smart plugs. All of those things are basically disconnected from the internet, and I fully own those pieces of hardware now, so that no matter what happens to those cloud services, I'm good. And this isn't to say, local good, cloud bad, because sometimes there are benefits to cloud services, but more and more, I think the layperson is beginning to understand, maybe a bit like the privacy argument. There's just been enough times it's happened now where they're thinking, hold on a minute, maybe there is something to this metadata collection. Maybe there is something to this internet of shit type stuff.
Maybe there is. Yeah, that's a good point. It's like it is maybe each outage is kind of pushing it into a new wave of people that are recognizing the problem. I kind of just have this general philosophy too. It's like, for an application to be whole, I prefer as much of it to be on my LAN, in part for security and privacy, but also, I started using the internet in an era of very limited bandwidth. I sometimes still have very limited bandwidth, and I don't like just extra chatter going out over my internet connection that doesn't need to. Every packet matters, in my opinion, and why send spammy little packets that are just maybe like messages back and forth for what I'm typing when I could run all that on my LAN? So that definitely is a mindset of mine that sort of has kind of, I guess, paid off over the years. Old man doesn't want to use up his modem bandwidth. But, as we just modernize and more things go online, there's also just things you have to use that are cloud-based. There's no way around it sometimes. And yeah, it does go out. I have yet to have it cause an actual genuine issue. For me, it's an inconvenience mostly. Maybe a show goes out a couple hours later. But in my IT life, I did have lawyers as clients, and there would often be like this extreme time pressure to turn around a contract that has something to do with, some $10 million deal. And we did have a situation where the Exchange server went down. And it was like red alert, all hands on deck, get this thing back up as fast as possible. We've got to get this email up because everybody self-hosted back then. And so you can also sometimes have these outages when you self-host. And, in like, I'm sure this has probably happened to everyone who's listening who's self-hosted for a while. It's going to fail when you're on vacation or something like that. Like my server here at the studio, which had been running fantastic, of course, crashed while I was on my road trip, and I was stuck in Tucson and I couldn't get back here for a week to check on what was going on. So that stuff happens when you self-host too. And, it's all on you to fix it.
Speaking of, I know I mentioned briefly that log4j vulnerability in the last bit. The linuxserver.io team have posted an info notice. I think this is a new thing they've started doing over at info.linuxserver.io about the log4j vulnerability. Essentially, this is a very critical vulnerability in Java, which leads to denial of service and remote code execution in Java apps. It's in Java version 11, so it's quite a recent version of Java. I think you and Wes did a full breakdown in this week's LAN, didn't you?
Yeah, we got all the details in there and the steps you'd have to go through to actually trigger the exploit. But spoiler is, you could actually even get this thing to remotely connect to remote URLs and pull down a shell script and run it. So it's not good. It's not good at all. And ironically, it was found by Minecraft users who figured out they could take control of the Minecraft server because most developers, and for totally reasonable reasons, are logging the commands their users are entering into the shell so they know what the user was doing. And if you take advantage of that, well, you could probably guess where that leads. So there's a lot of Minecraft servers out there that people have set up for themselves that are self-hosting that have to get updated. And you know what? I say good on Linux Server IO for going through and kind of letting people know what's up. I think that's also pretty nice to see. Just because I use a lot of their containers.
The main one that stood out for me was the Unify controller as being vulnerable. Obviously, that's got some pretty good network level access to your stuff. And so if there's a vulnerability there, you want to be on top of it pretty quick. There is a version released now with a workaround applied as well as an upstream fix. So if you're running Unify from Linux server in a container, go ahead and pull down that update. There's a few others on the webpage as well.
Yeah, I know some of our listeners use AirSonic, and that's one that's currently vulnerable as well. So watch out for that.
Now, I've been in the market to buy guitars in the last couple of weeks. Joe and I have been talking endlessly about guitars lately. And a lot of that has involved me F5ing a lot of websites to try and, see what's coming up on the used market, all that kind of stuff. And so I thought there's got to be a better way to monitor these web pages. And I came across an app pick called changedetection.io. This thing bills itself as the best and simplest self-hosted open source website change detection monitoring and notification service.
Cool. This looks really good. It gives you a little dashboard and shows you when a page was last checked, when it last changed, and then gives you buttons to check the difference, to recheck it.
Mm-hmm.
This is so neat.
It's really nice. And some of the examples they ship out of the box are for things like the COVID UK government page, for example. So, if you wanted to know when the guidelines change for that for some reason, you could have this send you a notification with the diff of what changed. So you don't even have to go to the website and look it up. I have mine pointed at the Gibson demo shop, for example. And, for me, it just lists, it just looks at the guitars that are on there. And every time a new guitar gets added, I get a push notification through AppRise to my phone with the link to the website, so I can just click on the link and go and have a look at that new shiny guitar that I can't afford.
Linode.com/SSH. And Linode has done the work to make sure that Log4Shell is not going to be a problem on their infrastructure. It's where we host everything. They're so dang fast. And they got 11 data centers around the world. We got a testimonial from Deckbot recently. It says, "Hey, Chris and the Badger. I recently moved homes, and in the process, I knew I needed to put a home server into storage for about a month. The server is my Samba server on ZFS, but I also had 2 cores and 8 gigs of RAM dedicated to a Minecraft VM. Knowing that they would still want to play while we were moving to the new house, I set up a $5 Nanode to install the Minecraft server and upload the world using Linode's game server how-to as a guide. Testing it, though, it showed maybe things would work okay, but I saw crashes as we started to use it more, and I realized Minecraft was RAM constrained. But Linode's single-click upgrade to the next Nanode was fast, flawless, and fixed the server's performance needs right away. Best of all, the single-core 2GB Nanode on the cloud was beating the performance of my locally hosted 2-core 8GB VM. You know what, Degbot? I see that all the time. Like I say, I used to do things in VMs, but this is what Linode does. They build and manage servers, and they've been doing it for 18 years, so they know how to make these things fast. And on top of that, they've got a great dashboard, and they have the best customer support in the business. It's where I test things. It's where I deploy things. It's where I learn about things. So go get $100 and try it out for 60 days. Kick the tires for yourself and support the show. Linode.com/SSH.
New month, new Home Assistant update. They just released their 2021.12 update. And along with that, there was also a 3-hour live stream, the Big State of the Stream project.
Yeah, it's the end of the year. I think they're going to just do this now all the time. Before we get into the details of what they announced, did you see the VR thing that they showed? How they do their team meetings now?
I did. It felt very like a rudimentary version of Ready Player One or something like that, you know?
Yeah. Well, Paul has filed up on Twitter, and he said, we at Nubukasa are doing all of our meetings in VR now. It feels more like being together compared to just a grid of webcam feeds. Especially for our collaborative sessions, it's a big win. We use Horizon Workrooms on the Oculus Quest 2, which is the standalone headset that runs Android. They don't connect it to a PC or anything like that. And he says why it's better for them is number one reason is body language compared to a webcam. Your hands and fingers are now included on the call, so you can point at things, you can gesture, you got emotions, you can draw on a whiteboard. Spatial audio actually lets you know where people are and makes it more immersive. But here's the other thing I didn't consider. And this made me go, it's faster. VR is faster. Because webcams, you're actually doing like an H.264 video stream or something like that, right? Or VP8 or whatever. But in VR, it's audio, and then it's just the data for the movements and stuff, the updates for the movements, and they're not actually sending the video feed of it, they're just sending the data feed. And so what you get is you fix this like, oh, no, you go. Oh, I'll go. Oh, can I? Oh, like that's gone now because the latency is so much better. Plus, you can see people are like, gesturing with their hands and whatnot. Actually kind of made me think. Here's when it kind of clicked for me. I thought to myself, this sounds so silly, right? Until then I thought, well, what if we use this for podcasting? Like, what if you and I were doing this right now? Right? That'd be pretty cool.
That would be interesting. I'd need to invest in some VR gear. And obviously, if I tell the wife, I need to buy VR gear for podcasting, which is an audio medium, and I need some kind of expensive video headset, I think that would go over really well.
Yeah, because really, you're going to want to get like the upgraded strap, and you're going to want the controls. So you're like $500 on Amazon, and then like to get good headphones that plug into it easily, that's like another $100. So you're almost to the price point of the style that you can plug into to the PC and it actually has good graphics.
Almost to a price point of a ticket to come and see you.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. Oh, man. All right. Well, anyways, the other thing that they just kind of slipped in there, maybe I missed this because I haven't been following this super closely, but the Home Assistant Amber, their little hardware device that they had crowdfunded. Well, I guess now it's called the Home Assistant Yellow. So they're changing the name. It's still based on the Pi Compute Module 4. Still got that M2 expansion slot and the Zigbee module and Gigabit Ethernet. And it's still available to order. But it's going to be a little bit, I think, before it's shipping. And now it's called the Yellow, not the Amber.
Well, like anything this year, I think you've just got to accept the fact that, for example, the 1080 Ti that I have in my graphics card in my gaming rig, I'm fine with that. I mean, if I could have bought a 3080 or whatever at retail for MSRP, I'd have probably done it. But, I think in 2021, we just got to accept the fact, and 22 now, that these shortages are going to continue. I think I was watching a Jay's 2 Cents video the other night where he was reciting some insider information that he has from his contacts at Intel and Nvidia, who said that the shortages at the end of 20 were going to continue through 21. And now they're saying the same thing at the end of 21. They're going to continue through the end of 22. So it is what it is. We all just got to end up being a bit more patient, I think.
Well, there's a lot of negatives to it. In the RV community, it's a massive problem. Parts are super short. And now there's rumors of a diesel exhaust fluid shortage, which the diesel pusher rigs need to go down the road. So the shortages, I don't want to make light of it. It's really bad. However, one silver lining that I would love to see out of it is people repurposing old PCs. Like I'm doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of thinking like, how can I just sort of spread stuff out a little bit or take advantage of stuff, and instead of going with something new, trying to refurbish something old. And I think that's actually a good way for us to be thinking.
Absolutely.
More and more.
Yeah, I mean, all of the systems in my house are based around the 8th gen Intel CPU socket. I've got, my backup server, my desktop, my main server, and my work desktop. They're all, all four of those systems have, and my Blue Iris system, 5. All 5 of those systems have 8th gen CPUs in them, so that if anything fails in there, I don't even have to think, what generation of CPU does that specific motherboard have? No, it's 8th gen, it's done.
Right.
And, if you
That's
do the
nice.
Comparisons between an 8th and an 11th or an 8th and a 12th, okay, by, 4 generations, there might be 10 or 15% difference. But is it worth the thousands of dollars to upgrade at this point? No. And I remember like 10 years ago when I went from a Core 2 Duo to one of those LGA 1366 i7 960s. Oh, that was like lightning, that thing. And I think it coincided with getting an SSD for the first time as well.
Oh, man. Yeah, it's a sweet upgrade.
We just don't have leaps like that anymore. I mean, I know NVMe is a lot faster than SATA and SSDs are a lot faster than spinning Rust, but I think a lot of the main speed generational bottlenecks between, an 8th and a 12th gen CPU, okay, there's PCIe Gen 4 is a slight change, but on the daily, I'm never really thinking, God, my computer's too slow these days.
I think you're seeing kind of a big leap over in the Apple side right now. And I was just thinking about this morning, man. I was just thinking I'd really like the Asahi Linux project to just come along a little bit more so that way I could try out the M1 Mac Mini as a home server in the RV. Because the damn thing takes 28 watts at max load, and that's at max load. And it takes a lot less, down to like 6 or 7 watts at low load, which is just, I can't even fathom that. I've seen the numbers and I still don't believe it. And it makes, for me, like the perfect home server if I could just get macOS off there.
I mean, my MacBook Pro that I'm using to record this episode right now, according to iStat, is using 8 watts to drive a 4K monitor, a 1080p monitor, and the laptop internal display, plus all the USB audio processing that it's doing, and 8 watts.
So it's nice to see that kind of shift. But yeah, as far as like gear I'm using for my home systems and servers right now, yeah, the older stuff is plenty fine. I mean, I'm still running Home Assistant on the Home Assistant Blue and on a Raspberry Pi. And I did do the new upgrade. I did because on the Blue, I'm using their OS. So now I've been upgraded to their new OS and to the new version of Home Assistant. It's got that brand new configuration panel and it looks a lot better.
Ugh. I don't like it.
Really?
No.
I think it's cleaner. It's more organized. It feels, I don't know, more like how it should have been probably all along.
Maybe. But it's, curmudgeon over here, it's change for change's sake. It feels, to get to my supervisor panel is an extra click now compared to what it used to be.
True. Yeah. I did see some grousing online about that.
I had to downgrade as well. I had a bunch of my automations stop working, particularly around Zigbee stuff.
Oh, no.
So I went to .12.0, I guess, and then I upgraded to .1. The Zigbee stuff still wasn't working, so I was like, right, I'm going back to .11 then. So there I will stay for a little while and see what happens.
Crap. I have not upgraded the RV yet. I've only upgraded the studio. That's how I do it. I do the studio first, and then if the studio passes, I'll do the...
It's no big deal with Home Assistant OS and the snapshots that you can take. So
yeah.
you just put them in Google Drive, and then you just download it and restore, and it's as if nothing happened, So.
My biggest fear is somehow some update writes something to my Z-Wave controller or something like that. You know,
Mm.
don't hurt the Z-Wave network. Just don't.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
So there was the new configuration panel. What did you think of the button entity stuff?
I like it. I've been waiting for something like this because my wife likes to sometimes use the physical buttons on like a LED light strip or a smart plug. She'll sometimes, if she's just there, she'll just use the button. And that's great. But every now and then, Home Assistant does lose state sync, and so it'll show off or on when we've pressed the button physically. And so now I think I'm just going to replace those with this kind of button, which just makes a lot more sense. It's just a switch you press. It has a state, on or off, but it doesn't move back and forth indicating what its state is. It just says, like, press. I think that's clean.
And I like to see this feature. Users can now be created that are able to log in only from the local network. So, if you want just a purely local user, you can create that. I was also pleased to see for you the new Jellyfin integration.
Yeah. How great of timing is this?
Great timing.
Yeah. The only problem is currently limited to music only, which is not great. I'm sure they're going to get there, right? But it's a good starting spot. We'll see. I would like to see, of course, video and all of that. Also nice that the Hue integration now supports the version 2 of API for the Hue lights and Hue devices, which means they show up a lot faster. That's good to see. And I have a Pi-hole. I know you don't use Pi-hole, but I have Pi-hole, and that integration's been updated to indicate when Pi-hole needs an update, which is nice too. Few integration changes.
One thing that came up in the presentation from Powerless was some of the work that's been done in the ESP Home project that's been upstream to other projects.
Yeah.
I actually tried setting up for my Christmas tree. I did a bunch of LEDs for my Christmas tree with running WLED connected to an ESP8266. And back in the day, I've done a live stream with you actually a couple of years ago now.
Yeah.
Where we had to create an Arduino sketch and then upload it and then do all this ESP tool-based flashing. Now, you can just do it all in the browser and it picks it up in the browser. Oh, man, you've got to try it. It's amazing.
I love seeing that. Yeah, they give it its due on the live stream now, too. Now that they're all part of the same family. That's good to see. And so I did do the Home Assistant OS 7 upgrade. I mean, there's not a lot in this one. The Broadcom and Atheros Ethernet drivers got updated. That's good to see. And this brings the Linux kernel up to Linux 5.10.8.3. The reason why that kind of matters is Linux 5.10 is an LTS kernel that will be maintained through the end of 2026. And so if they're going to be rolling their own OS, which I've always kind of been hesitant about, but I'm warming up to more and more as time goes on, when I see things like they're using the LTS kernel, that to me shows that they're making some good long-term thought choices there about like how to build something that's going to be potentially run on an IoT device for a while. And that made me feel a little better when I saw they're doing that. So I went ahead and did the upgrade first. I do the OS update first. Well, first I do a snapshot. Then I do the OS update, reboot everything. And then when it comes back up, I do the Home Assistant update. And it all went pretty good for me. I don't have nearly the depth of automations here at the studio that I have at the RV, or likely you have at home, Alex. So I'll probably wait another week or two before I upgrade the RV, just to make sure nothing's going on with Zigbee, and just to make sure nothing's going on with Z-Wave, and just to make sure my automations are okay.
I mean, look, I know what's going to happen is if I post in the forum saying I had this issue, someone's going to say, well, you've been ignoring this thing in your log files for the last 6 months, this deprecation notice, and I don't know, I just can't be bothered to deal with it. So I downgraded for now. Anyway, speaking of which, I think it's time we did some feedback, don't you?
Yeah, we wanted to do a bunch for this episode. In fact, we were going to mention it earlier. It's episode 60. It's a feedback special.
Indeed, 60 episodes. Wow, that's a lot of episodes. In fact, if we've been doing weekly, we'd be at 120 by now.
Whoa.
You see my maths there? That was
quick.
Pretty quick. Anyway, Red asks, do you guys have any naming conventions for your Home Assistant automations?
Oh, that's a great question. I should. If you were to look at my automations right now, I think I've tried 3 different naming schemes, over the couple of years that I've been running Home Assistant now. It's kind of embarrassing.
You are an XKCD comic personified, are you?
Yeah. It's kind of embarrassing.
I try and do something like I try and group them, button dash office lights toggle, button dash toggle music room lamps, whatever it is. Climate dash up and downstairs set to 18 Celsius, that kind of thing at 8 a.m. I try and make the titles as descriptive as possible, starting off with, the type of event first, or integration, I suppose, first.
Mm-hmm.
And then if that doesn't work, I'll do things like notify dash. So I just have like a single word and then a hyphen and then an explanation of what it does. That seems to work okay.
Yeah, it's pretty close to what I've pretty much landed on. Mine's a little more rudimentary. It's just like if it's if it's a heater and it's being turned on, it's heat on dash name a heater, heat off dash name a heater. But I've pretty much retired all of those now that I'm using the generic thermostat.
I used to have a whole bunch that started turn on, turn off this, turn on that. And when you're looking through a whole group of stuff, you kind of want to group things together a little bit. Like you want all the bedroom automations to be together. You want all the kitchen things to be together.
Yeah.
And so, you've just got to find a logical grouping that works for you and stick with it.
That's how I would do it too, is do it so that way all the same areas look all in the same spot when you're looking at the damn list. All right, Alex, our next one comes in on how to approach a company about building a Home Assistant integration based on their API. So this is a tricky one a listener of ours ran into. And they have basically created an integration that they realize may actually get them in trouble. And so they're wanting our opinion on the best way to approach companies. It's a European company. They're big in this space. So should they open source the library and just hope for the best? Should they try to contact the company and get permissions? What are your thoughts on how they should approach them?
Well, I think it depends on the company. In the question, which is linked to in the show notes, there's an awful lot more detail, but essentially this one revolves around reverse engineering token generation. So, if you were to contact this company and say, hey, I have been able to achieve this result, you will end up in one of two situations. One, you'll end up in the Swedish school voting app situation. I don't know if you saw this in the news a little while ago. A couple of parents basically reverse engineered their school district's app to allow parents to talk to teachers and all that kind of thing so that they could access the API that was publicly available and then build another app on top of it that was better. So you might end up in a situation that they did where the local government comes after you and starts issuing cease and desist letters and say, hey, stop that, you're hacking us, blah, 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 blah. Because they don't understand that the publicly available API data is just that. It's not hacking. It's available. That is how an API works.
Yeah.
Or you'll end up in a situation where the company is receptive and you might end up with a job out of it, or some kind of situation where they're open to people willing to work with things like responsible disclosure and all that kind of thing. So
yeah.
Don't go posting it all over Reddit and Twitter as your first port of call. Talk to the company first if you're worried it's going to get you in trouble and see what their response is. And then you can start going down the responsible disclosure routes and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I think that's all probably pretty good advice. You could also try to, maybe go a little LinkedIn spelunking, see if you can find some people that might be in the right areas of the company for you to reach out to. If the company has a forum that they run, sometimes some of the employees are active in there and you can kind of get a sense, start getting an idea who you're dealing with. This has got to be a wider problem. Even when you're not cracking tokens and whatnot, there's a lot of crap out there that could do with some Home Assistant integration, and they just need somebody to come knock on their door. Like, it is a crime against humanity that the Victron folks that do my inverter and my charge controller and manage all the power in my RV, it's a damn crime against humanity that they don't make a Home Assistant integration available. Not only does the Victron system support MQTT, but it also supports Modbus over Ethernet and TCP. So there's two really straightforward ways that they could build an integration to get that data, which would be life-changing. And I've talked to people who've built all their own solutions for this stuff, but it's just a great example of you can find people out there that are reverse engineering it right now for these Victron systems. But really what it needs is the company to either document this stuff or come out and do it or enable a community to build something, right? That's what we need. And I don't know how we start changing that culture, because when they're looking at how they're going to spend their engineers' time and resources, it's a hard thing to pro and con. It just looks like a waste of time when you're doing it on a pro and con list.
I wonder how many more sales people like Victron might make if they advertised the Home Assistant integration. That's perhaps the angle that you have to approach it, is the business angle. to get the product owners interested in spending those development tokens on what we want them to do.
I think it was Frank. I think Frank on the live stream for Home Assistant said that vans and mobile applications are actually a very large use case for Home Assistant, which blew my mind. I'm like, hey, that's me. Like, but that's actually like something that is a big enough use case. It was brought up on the live stream. And yeah, when you're looking at the energy monitoring capabilities and logging and long-term logging now available in Home Assistant, yeah, that'd be powerful.
Well, James writes in defense of Portainer after last week's character assassination that I think we gave it. Hey guys, I just listened to 59 where y'all talk about Portainer. Whilst I do love SSH and Docker CLI for most of my personal setup, I think Portainer is great at two things at my company. Number one, it provides discoverability for new users. We're slowly dragging our company into the wonderful world of containers, but it is slow getting everybody on board. Having a nice GUI to show all the options for Docker Run and to easily store things like Docker Compose stacks or private registry credentials where anyone can access them is a huge benefit to us. Number two, it also provides some level of access control, even in the free version remotely. While we could just set up OS users for everyone on our big Docker test server, it's much easier for me to just let Portainer handle it and somewhat lock it down, especially when it comes to things like the QA team, who don't really care about how things work under the hood. They just want to click a button, update a container, and do their testing. Thanks and love the show, James.
Fair enough. Yeah, after we recorded and I was chatting about it with Wes, it did kind of dawn on me, oh, right. When you got a team of people that might need to poke in on these containers, I start to appreciate a tool like this a little bit more. Like, we have more systems in the cloud on Linode than we probably should without some sort of tool like this, because there's a lot of containers out there that we have running. And, you know, you've got some and Wes and I have some running. I've got some that only I've set up. Wes has some that only he's set up. We've got a lot of applications that are running in containers up there. I could see how Portainer would be nice to manage all that. I think we're probably pushing what you could do with the free version, though.
I mean, don't forget, I work on a daily basis with OpenShift, and that really is the value add proposition of OpenShift. I mean, there's a few more to it when you start getting down into the technical weeds, but really it's presenting a cohesive single pane of glass across different clouds. That's really the value add of OpenShift, the hybrid cloud thing that you hear. That's what it's doing, is it's giving people a standardized interface to access the underlying abstractions, which in this case are containers. You know, and James, who writes in, does make a valid point that, you know, you can use GUIs to solve that problem. I would argue that also you could use just simple bash aliases and some good documentation. But, you know, I've worked with some QA teams in the past that really don't care how it works under the hood. They don't care if it's the perfect technical solution. They just need to close their ticket and move on to the next one.
Well, and that's why often, especially internal projects, you'll go to a web page and there's a button, and that button, you know, it's just some hack script that's just doing something to, like, you know, check something and check something out and put them in the right spot for the QA. Like, it can get real hacky, but they don't care.
I'll tell you what I would like to see for JB, and this is my own personal wish list that you don't know what I'm thinking yet. So this is a voyage of discovery for you here, Chris.
Ooh.
You've been talking about this new server in LUP where you want to do tumbleweed or something crazy with SUSE. I don't know what you're smoking over there, but
well, the audience voted. I'm not convinced in the legitimacy of the results, but we're proceeding to maintain faith.
Well, I was thinking, why don't we look at something like K3S, which is like a lightweight Kubernetes from the Rancher team, an open source thing that is, you know, based around Kubernetes, which is an industry standard deployment mechanism that we could adopt as a network, you know?
For the on-premise and cloud systems.
Perhaps, yeah. I mean, it's a lot of work for me, but I'm not afraid of a challenge.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we should talk more about it. We should have like a little powwow with Wes and like, you know, brainstorm.
I mean, there's a bunch of problems to solve, like DNS and load balancing and, you know, access control and all that kind of stuff. But for me, when we had that Hedgehog outage a couple of weeks ago, for me, it was a red flag to say, hey, Chris doesn't have access to this box. Perhaps you should fix that, Alex. Perhaps we should have a more centralized way of managing all the JB core services that we use to do the production of these shows.
Backblaze.com/SSH. Go there to get a free trial, no credit card required. Yeah, it's Backblaze. That's right. Unlimited computer backup for your Macs and PCs, just $7 a month when you go to backblaze.com/SSH. You can restore files from anywhere. You can directly download them from the web. Or, if it's a lot, you can even restore them by mail. You purchase a disk, they'll overnight it to you, and then you can just return it to them when you're done for a refund. They also give you access via their mobile app. They've restored over 50 billion files for their customers. Can you believe that? So go try out a free, fully featured, no credit card required trial at backblaze.com/SSH. Yeah, that's right, backblaze.com/SSH. You guys know about Backblaze. This is the opportunity to try it out and support the show. Get a full featured 15-day free trial at backblaze.com/SSH. Go there, play with it, and start protecting yourself from a potential bad day. Start today at backblaze.com/SSH.
Okay, so 5 writes in with a science fiction self-hosted vision. This is a bit wacky, so bear with me.
All right, get in story mode.
Stay a while and listen. Okay, so I perceive my data as captives on a Titan-class closed system ship. Some of the captives are treated quite restrictedly, whilst others might be provided with what seems like paradise, with ample food and simulated sunlight and fauna and so on. As we know, what appears to be too good to be true typically is too good to be true. There's no telling when the captives decide to unleash a vicious creature or deadly virus on the captives. I envision projects like Home Assistant, Jellyfin, and Matrix as emergency life pods liberating the captives. It would be suicide to take on the whole armada at once, but we are able to rescue a few captives from each platform. Once our Libre starship is prepared for their arrival, the captives can adjust to the stable LTS systems, and these systems could also be stable container-based systems. Look, I'm not judging. After the freed captives are acclimatized, we can fly off and break free the next victims behind proprietary space jails. Keep the Jupiter Broadcasting beacon illuminated for our wayward souls.
Okay. I want whatever he was having when he wrote that in. That's great. It is true, though. I kind of, like last episode, I was kind of grousing about hosting Matrix. But I do feel like it's a bit of a hedge. I totally admit Discord gets more engagement, has a way bigger network effect. It's way simpler for users to get going on. And from an administrator's perspective, it's so much less work. But Matrix is ran on my own infrastructure, and like I like that I can have an @Jupiter Broadcasting account on there. It's my domain. And so I feel like it's a bit of a hedge from when it seems like eventually Discord's going to turn into like a piece of crap, as all of these social platforms tend to eventually do. And so we keep it going, and I also like the challenge of figuring out how to manage something like a Synapse server, which is a constantly growing and changing beast. It's an interesting infrastructure challenge too. Charles writes in, he says, I've been listening since episode 1. I have an idea for discussion on the show that I'd like to hear you guys chew on. What about self-hosting Git? Is it worth that over using something like GitHub? I see so many people in the community, often open source software users, that are just up on GitHub when we have solutions like GitLab and Git, and of course, there's just plain Git. I'm not a developer myself, but I'm trying to move my self-hosted services to Git-based Docker Compose files. Thanks as always. So Charles wants to know your thoughts on like running your own GitLab or just using GitHub, because I know you use GitHub quite a bit for stuff.
Doesn't have to be an exclusive relationship with GitHub. So that's the thing, right? I run a Git server at home, and I mirror every single Git repo that I have on GitHub using their mirroring functionality built into Git to my local instance. So I generally go with GitHub on stuff that I know other people are going to see or want to see, or I think they might find useful, just simply for that network effect. And then everything else, like my personal wikis and stuff like that I don't want Sache to have access to, I keep them in my local Git instance and they never leave my LAN. It's just, there are different classifications for different types of data, in my opinion. And, you just got to figure out which service works best for that particular piece of code or whatever it is.
Man, if that doesn't just sum up how I kind of weigh the pros and cons of what I cloud host versus what I self-host right there, actually. Because like you're using Git for your notes system, right? So that's, for that reason.
Yeah, I'm still figuring that out, actually. The Obsidian mixed with Drone CI and an Nginx-based container running mkdocs. I am still working on that blog post, but I don't know. Since I've become a parent, my time just evaporates.
I know.
I just can't get the blog posts out like I used to. I am still working on it, and I am still using it, but maybe I'll get it out before the end of the year, but we'll see.
Pew, pew, pew. All right, it's our last one. Pew, 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 pew. And we'd love to get your feedback. We try to get a couple in every episode, and every now and then for a special version of the show, like additions, like these 60 milestones. It's great to have your feedback, so we can just go through all of these. So please send us your thoughts, your questions, your ideas, your cool builds, whatever it might be at selfhosted.show/contact. And Deckbot takes us out with the last one, saying, I often hear comments like infrastructure as code, as well as sentiments like your servers are cattle, not pets. Well, as a Linux system enthusiast, I disagree with that premise. My servers are pets. They are special in my heart. That said, once a decade, when I finally get around to replacing the hardware, I'd like to spend less time potty training them. He goes on to say, is there a recommended guidebook or a primer for Ansible or some other such tools that would be good for us hobbyist admins? Thanks for the show. It always gets me to try new things. Kind regards, Deckbot.
I mean, there's a huge bunch of content around for Ansible. Jeff Geerling, friend of the show, he's got an absolutely amazing Ansible 101 series on YouTube. There's a book I read a while back called Infrastructure as Code by Keith Morris, which I'll link to in the show notes as well. In that book, he lays out an infrastructure framework for defining every part of your infrastructure as text files. And sometimes, as we call it, code. So infrastructure as code, that's what the phrase means. And essentially, my take on infrastructure as code is it's actually helping me be less stupid, because I can't tell you how often I set a system up manually, even if it's a very simple task like installing 1 or 2 packages, and then a year or 2 elapses and I come back to that server and I'm like, what did I do that for? How, what? And so for me, it's just a case of saving myself, a future self, a bunch of time.
Yeah, I think the other thing I would really like out of it, and one of the reasons why I want to get into this mindset myself, is you can build on things you figured out before, because the code is a documentation of sorts. You document your infrastructure there, so you can go back and review what you figured out, and you can build on top of that for future deployments, which I like that a lot. But I am with you, Deckbot, in that my servers, like my home server in the RV and the server here at the studio, they have real special places in my heart. Like I have inappropriate feels for both of those rigs, but I get what the sentiment actually is going for. When you treat it as cattle, the idea is it's something that if it had to be replaced, if its life cycle was complete, it's easy to replace, it's easy to swap out. The more I think about the analogy, it's kind of gross, but I get the idea, because if you adopt that mindset, then your data tends to be protected and isolated, your configurations tend to be off the rig, and you're actually in a much better place should there be some kind of hardware failure or other disaster, just adopting that mindset and kind of deploying things like that. So even if you still have like the real inappropriate man feels like I do, it's still probably a better way to manage them and keep them. And it's getting to the point now where I'm kind of feeling like what Alex was alluding to earlier is just like wiping a clean slate, redeploying everything, and doing the whole thing from the ground up that way. But it just is such a massive project. But of course, if we ever do it, I think we'd probably document the journey here on the show.
Yeah, and we do have an infrastructure repo for the show as it stands at github.com/self-hosted-show/infra, which I'll put a link to in the show notes. There's a bunch of Terraform in there and Ansible in there that I use to deploy all of the show infrastructure that I manage for Chris. But even if you're only implementing a few principles within the infrastructure as code kind of ethos, you're still a lot further down the road than a lot of people that don't even know what that phrase means. So, 10% of something is 10% more than 0.
That's right. I like your math today, dude. You're math whiz.
Thank you.
I feel like I should mention there is a possibility this is going to get canceled because of the news out there. But I feel like I want to mention that if things go okay, Corona-wise, we are going to have a meetup at the studio January 2nd. And I'm trying out Get Together because Get Together is a meetup alternative that you can self-host. I'm trying out their hosted version right now to see how people like it for this small event. And it's gettogether.community/JBHQ, or I'll just have a link in the show notes. If you'd like to join us, we're going to have a new server christening party on January 2nd, assuming I can get everything done by then. I actually haven't even got the things powered on yet. I've been so busy. And then there's also the whole Corona thing. So it's all up in the air. But if it happens, that's where you'll find out about it, even though it says it's at 3 a.m. for some weird reason. Also, I'd like to mention that we've now launched, based on popular demand, a network-wide membership. And if you sign up before the end of December, it's coming up quick, I'm taking $2 off a month for a year. So it's less than the price of two show memberships, and you get access to all the network goodies, every show's special features and goodies, and any new shows we add. And it's also the only way to get Linux Action News totally ad-free. And of course, it supports the network. It gives us that flexibility to be picky with the sponsors that we choose. It lets us do extra little things like get-togethers every now and then. And of course, it gives us runway to make sure that while we are working on developing relationships with sponsors or whoever it might be, show production continues. That's critical. So Jupiter.party, if you'd like to sign up for the whole network membership, there's also a gift option right there. And of course, you can maintain your self-hosted membership if you'd like to just support this show. If this is your favorite thing, that's what you listen to, self-hosted.show/SRE. You get our special post show and everything like that. Even if you can't support us with a membership, though, we still really appreciate you listening, downloading, and maybe sharing it with a friend.
A question we've had a few times, actually, is once I am a member, how do I get access to the member feeds?
So you can log in at any time to the member area, but right after you sign up, it'll actually redirect you to a feed page, and it will generate a feed for each show. And if I add a show down the road, you log into the membership area, and you just go pull that new feed. And then you just got to go pop that in your podcast player. It's a custom dynamic feed created just for each member. And we do make it possible to subscribe to just the ones you want to listen to. So maybe you don't want all the shows. I mean, I don't know what's wrong with you, but maybe you don't. Then you can just pick the ones you want in there.
Well, very good. Thanks for supporting the show if you're an SRE already. And good work, Chris and Wes, on that membership. It's something that's been in the works for a very, very long time.
Yeah. You know what? It was like we had to connect multiple platforms together, 3. And then there was like contract stuff, because now all of the shows, which I didn't say earlier, but this is kind of a big deal too. It's not limited ads anymore. It's ad free. Unless I didn't manage to get all the ads in I was supposed to, which shouldn't happen. But that's also been a big thing we've been working on at the same time. So we could kind of do an upgrade, because it's now been a year of memberships. And so we wanted to go from limited ads to no ads. Because, you know what? Also, I hear from some people, they don't mind the ads. That's fine. Like, you know what? Thank you. Really. Because we need people listening to the ads too. It helps that way as well. So it works out both ways. And I like having that mix, because it kind of gives us the flexibility to be kind of picky. You get these, you almost get like these spam level sponsors that just want to blast all podcasts. You hear them all the time. You probably can think of a few of them off the top of your heads. And that just doesn't serve our audience, right? So that's why I think the memberships are great.
You mean you don't want a new mattress in a box every week?
No. Yeah, there's a lot of those. We'd love your feedback. Like I said earlier, selfhosted.show/contact. And you can also find there is a self-hosted, besides we mentioned the Discord, there is a self-hosted Discord, selfhosted.show/Discord. But there is also a Matrix room on our Jupiter Broadcasting Matrix server at colony.jupiterbroadcasting.com.
Rumor has it as well, we're stopping Twitter plugs for the foreseeable future now that Jack's out.
I mean, I've been rolling back. Yeah, I feel like if Jack's out, I mean, do you love Twitter? I don't love Twitter. I use it. I like it for replying to people. That's what I like Twitter for, and that's about it,
It's nice, I put out a post the other day saying, has anybody got any old hardware they're looking to get rid of or to sell? Because I want to benchmark a whole different bunch of QuickSync CPUs, which I'm working on an article for that. And I've actually had a listener send me a 4th gen CPU who lives in Charlotte.
cool.
He sent it over. So I'm going to borrow that for a few weeks and do a benchmark.
Was that a connection made by Twitter? Is that where?
Yeah, through
Yeah.
Twitter.
Gotcha.
So if you have an old QuickSync motherboard you're no longer using, let me know via Twitter @IronicBadger. And I still plugged it. It's just habit,
Yeah,
I
it's still
guess.
good. I mean, I still like the interactions I have with people on there. I've just been thinking, like, if they were going to follow us, they probably have done it by now. So now I've been thinking, like, maybe I'll plug the Matrix. We also have a Telegram channel at jupiterbroadcasting.com/Telegram. But, I'm on there at Chris Lass. If you tweet at me, I'll tweet you back.
And if you want to find all of our show notes, you can go to notes.jupiterbroadcasting.com for a searchable archive of the Jupiter Broadcasting show notes. And so all that's left for me to say is thank you very much for listening, everybody. That was self-hosted.show/60.